Well, let's analyse all the latest for you now then. Joining me now on the line is Professor and Middle East Specialist at the University of Exeter, Myriam Benraad. Thanks very much for being with us on the programme. I mean, overall, bearing in mind where we were 12 or 24 hours ago, a sentiment of relief?
Yes, I think for the international community, for the Middle East, for Iran, for the Iranian population at least, because we were very worried that with these threats, a new threshold in the escalation would be crossed. I was not really a big believer in the sorts of threats Donald Trump issued, but I was quite afraid that, again, that the escalation would be more serious. We have 2 weeks now to see what the two parties will negotiate, given that we still receive every day very contradictory messages of devastating threats. And I really agree with what your reporter said. And at the same time, promises of conciliation, including from the US, at times from Israel. But on the ground, of course, as you can see through the case of Lebanon and in the Strait of Hormuz, nothing has really improved in the last weeks. So this is we are in an unknown somehow. We don't really know what the future holds.
Perhaps not surprisingly, after a conflict like this, we're seeing both sides claiming victory. I mean, do you think both sides can claim some kind of victory, or do you see it as more one-sided than that?
Well, I don't think there will be any clear victory. It was like in last year during the last sequence of war between Israel, Iran, and the US. There was no clear victory, and I think everyone agrees at this stage that we won't see any clear victory either from Iran or from the US and Israel. I think this is a very ideological projection that both sides have. What we are seeing is a return, indeed, to some pre-war conditions, at least on the American side. If you have a close look at the peace plan, the conditions that were put on the table by the Iranians, this is indeed the pre-war situation, even worse, because one of the conditions is clearly the continuation of uranium enrichment, which I think Israel will never agree upon. So this is probably the potential source of a renewed cycle of violence. The regime hasn't fallen. We were talking about regime change a few weeks ago. The regime is still in place. And I think the prospects are very high today that what will remain of this regime will be even worse, hardened in the post-war sequence. So this is a complete strategic failure.
Do you have some hopes for the talks, though? I mean, the two sides, to a certain extent, are going to have to find common ground, aren't they? I was talking to a French general in the last half hour of the programme who was saying he can't see a way now that Donald Trump could just decide to restart strikes, bearing in mind what's happened over the last month.
Well, I think the strikes can go on. The strikes have been going on for a while. There has been an intensification in the last 2 months, but the truth is that the strikes have been regular since the 7th of October, and this constant escalation of the conflict in the region, which has regionalized, internationalized, and which is now a concern for the entire international community, of course. I don't think there will be a real end to the armed hostilities. I think what this new episode shows quite clearly is the fact that there was never a plan for the day after. And this is also valid for Gaza. We don't really speak about Gaza these days, but this is completely obscured by the conflict with Iran. But there was no plan for the aftermath of the war, and that's exactly what's going on now with Iran. We don't really know what the day after is made of, and the prospects, unfortunately, as I fear, are the prospects of a regime that will not just maintain itself, but be again even more authoritarian, repressive. So this is a complete betrayal also of the promise made to the Iranian population, which I think at this stage realizes that it was never about liberating Iran from theocracy, from this regime, but it was a complete jump into the unknown, as I said earlier, which is why I don't think we can even mention the word victory in this case.
I wanted to talk to you as well about Lebanon. You mentioned it very briefly. Let's hear, first of all, just what Emmanuel Macron has said in the last hour or so. Here's Emmanuel Macron.
What we've witnessed with the airstrikes and the occupation of southern Lebanon cannot be a long-term solution. And so this ceasefire must also include Lebanon. It is our responsibility to ensure that the coordination mechanism that has been in place for several months, involving the United States and France, is fully reactivated to strengthen support for the Lebanese armed forces so they can fully regain control of their territory and effectively combat Hezbollah.
Emmanuel Macron there. I mean, there's a real fear, isn't there, now that a lot of the world's attention, assuming this ceasefire kind of holds, will drift away from the region, leaving the Lebanese and Israel still involved fully in their conflict.
Well, I think we have to consider two dimensions. There is this ground confrontation with Iran, which, as I said, in the end is very ideological, and we're seeing the outcome, which, as I mentioned, is really not a victory or anything we should celebrate, given also the, of course, the reverberations it's had across the world and the implications for the rest of the international community. I think the situation in Lebanon is very different, because whether Iran is weakened or not, whether Iran agrees on a long-term ceasefire at some point with the US, with Israel, so if we see a form of retreat of Iran, this doesn't mean that the conflict with Hezbollah ends here. I think we need to bear in mind that groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, and all these so-called proxies also have always had their autonomy and their margin of maneuver. And this is the second failure, in my view. We have not seen the end, as was announced, neither of Hamas nor of Hezbollah. I think these groups will most probably do everything they can to reconstitute themselves. They will be, and of course, hardened by the last sequence of war, which is especially extreme if you compare with previous wars. I'm not saying that the previous wars were not violent and murderous, but there is a clear exacerbation today with these constant bombings. The level of casualties also is quite frightening. So there will be most probably, unfortunately, a radicalization of these groups, and they're not going to stop the war, given also that, as you know, they're in this logic of martyrdom. So I don't think we should celebrate anything really, because we've always known to conclude that the solution could not just be military, that we needed a political roadmap, and unfortunately we have seen none, or we have seen one from Donald Trump last fall, and I've not heard much since, so I don't really know where all of this is going.